The Vatican called her dangerous. The Italian government gave her a Lifetime Achievement Award. And Margherita Hack looked at both of them and said, "I'm just a scientist who tells the truth." She was born in Florence, the same city that once put Galileo on trial for saying the earth moves around the sun. She lived long enough to watch the church apologize to Galileo. She did not hold her breath, waiting for her own apology. This is the story of Italy's greatest astrophysicist, a woman who read the chemical fingerprints of stars, directed a major astronomical observatory for 25 years, and collaborated with NASA at a time when Italian women barely had access to universities. A woman who had an asteroid named after her by scientists, and a lawsuit filed against her by the church. Same battle as Galileo. 400 years later, different century, same Italy. This is her story. Florence, Italy, 1922. If you have been following this channel, you already know this city. We were here for Oriana Fallacy, born in 1929. Now we go back 7 years earlier to the same cobblestone streets, the same Arno River, the same Florentine light, and another woman who would refuse with remarkable consistency to behave the way Florence expected her to. Margherita Hack was born into a home that was already unusual for its time. Her father was a bookkeeper who painted in his spare hours. Her mother was a sculptor. Both parents were free thinkers, deeply skeptical of institutional religion, interested in philosophy and the life of the mind. In other words, she was raised in a house full of art, full of questions, and almost entirely free of the particular Italian assumption that the church had the final word on anything. This was not a small thing in 1920s Florence. This was, in its quiet way, a radical upbringing. She was also, and this is the detail that nobody puts in the headline, an extraordinary athlete. Margherita Hack won the Italian National Athletics Championship in the long jump. She was fast, she was strong, she was competitive in the specific way of someone who has learned that her body is an instrument of precision and that precision is rewarded. She could have gone to the Olympics. The trajectory existed. The talent was there. And then came the war. And then came physics. The Second World War arrived in Florence when Margherita was 17. The world she had grown up in, cultured, artistic, relatively protected, came apart with the speed that only wars achieve. She and her husband, Aldo, she married young and stayed married to him for 73 years, which is its own kind of remarkable. Found themselves in a city under occupation, under bombardment, under the grinding daily terror of fascism in its final and most desperate phase. And in the middle of all of this, Margherita Hack discovered astrophysics. Not accidentally, not as an escape in the trivial sense, but as the specific response of a precise and restless mind to a world that had temporarily run out of reliable things. The stars were reliable, the laws of physics were reliable, the chemical composition of a star's atmosphere was reliable in a way that nothing on the ground beneath her feet appeared to be. She enrolled at the University of Florence to study physics. She graduated in 1945, the same year the war ended. Italy's greatest astrophysicist almost became an Olympic athlete instead. History, as usual, had other plans. To understand what Margherita Hack actually did, what the work was, what it meant, you need to understand what stellar spectroscopy is. Bear with me for 60 seconds. This matters. When starlight passes through a prism or through the spectrograph of a telescope, it separates into a spectrum of colors, and within that spectrum there are dark lines, specific lines, lines that appear at precise wavelengths determined by the chemical elements present in the star's atmosphere. Hydrogen produces one set of lines, helium another, carbon another, iron another. Every star has a fingerprint, and if you know how to read it, if you know the language of spectral lines, you can determine from millions of light years away exactly what a star is made of, its temperature, its age, its chemical composition, its place in the life cycle of the universe. Margherita Hack learned to read those fingerprints, and then she spent her career teaching the world to read them too. She became one of the leading experts in stellar spectroscopy in Europe, publishing research, building collaborations, pushing Italian astronomy into the international conversation at a moment when Italian science was still recovering from the damage fascism had done to its institutions. In 1964, she was appointed director of the Trieste Astronomical Observatory. She was 42 years old. She was the first woman to hold such a position in Italy. She would hold it for 25 years. 25 years of building an institution, recruiting researchers, publishing findings, fighting for funding, arguing with bureaucrats, and simultaneously producing the scientific work that would eventually reach, of all places, outer space. Because here is the thing about Margherita Hack's science that history tends to understate. It left the planet. Her work on stellar atmospheres and spectral classification contributed to the data systems used by NASA and the European Space Agency. At a time when Italian women were still fighting for access to university positions, her research was being used by the organizations that were pointing telescopes at the edge of the observable universe. Her work is literally embedded in the Hubble Space Telescope data system. The woman who grew up in occupied Florence, who learned physics while bombs fell on her city, who became a scientist in a country that had spent decades trying to keep women out of the laboratory. She taught the world how to read the stars. And she was not done. Because there was another thing Margherita Hack was doing, quietly at first and then loudly, that had nothing to do with stellar spectroscopy and everything to do with the particular position she occupied as the most famous female scientist in Italian public life. She was telling the truth. In Italy, on television, about the Catholic Church. In the 1970s and 1980s, as her scientific reputation grew and her public profile expanded, Margherita Hack began saying clearly and without apology what she actually believed. She was an atheist. She had always been an atheist, raised in a free-thinking home, trained in a discipline that explains the universe without requiring a creator, temperamentally incapable of pretending otherwise. In most countries, this would not be a professional risk. In Italy, in a country where the Vatican sits in the middle of Rome and the Pope's opinions are treated as political events, it was something else entirely. She compared herself to Galileo openly, not with false modesty and not with false drama, simply as a statement of observable fact. The Church, she said, never changes, only the century does. Galileo was wrong about the details of the solar system, but right about the method, that observation and evidence should govern our understanding of the universe, not doctrine and authority. 400 years later, she said, the same argument is still happening. The same institution is still on the wrong side of it. The same scientists are still being told to be quiet. She was not quiet. Here is what I find most extraordinary about Margherita Hack. Most scientists, even great ones, even brave ones, reach a point in their careers where the work becomes the thing, where the institution they have built, the reputation they have earned, the peace they have finally achieved after decades of fighting, becomes something to protect. Most scientists at 70 start being careful. Margherita Hack, at 70, started picking more fights. Animal rights. She had been a vegetarian for decades, not for health reasons, but for ethical ones, with the specific moral consistency of someone who has spent a career thinking rigorously about what she actually believes in. Why? LGBT rights. In a country where same-sex unions were still being blocked by parliamentary maneuvers backed by Vatican lobbying, she was one of the most visible public voices saying, plainly, that this was discrimination dressed as tradition. Euthanasia rights, the right to die with dignity. In Catholic Italy, with the memory of a young woman kept alive in a vegetative state for 17 years, while her family and the church fought over her body, still raw in the national consciousness, Margherita Hack said clearly that a person's death belongs to that person. She was in her 80s when she said most of this. She was still publishing scientific papers, still giving lectures, still appearing on television with the specific energy of someone who has more to say than time allows. She was also, by this point, being sued. In 2005, she gave an interview in which she described the virgin birth as biologically implausible and characterized some church doctrine as fairy tales. A Catholic organization filed a complaint against her for vilification of religion. The case was eventually dropped. Margherita Hack's response to the entire episode was, characteristically, to continue the interview she had been giving. Now, I want to pause here for a moment, because there is a version of this story that is simple. Brave scientist versus powerful church. Reason versus superstition. Galileo's heir versus the institution that put Galileo on trial. And that version is not wrong. The power imbalance was real. The suppression of scientific voices in Italy was real. The use of legal mechanisms to silence criticism of religion was real and troubling. But Margherita Hack was also at times blunt in ways that went beyond scientific critique into something sharper. She did not always distinguish between institutional religion as a political force, which is a legitimate target for criticism, and the personal faith of millions of Italians who found meaning and community and comfort in the church she was describing as a scientific problem. Her defenders said she was a scientist, not a diplomat, that the obligation to speak plainly about evidence is more important than the obligation to manage other people's feelings about their beliefs, that Italy needed this voice precisely because so few public figures were willing to say what she said. Her critics said there is a difference between scientific argument and contempt, that atheism, like faith, can become its own form of certainty that stops listening. I'm going to do the same thing here that I did with Oriana Falassi and with Rita Levi Montalcini. I am not going to tell you which side is right. Because I think Margherita Hack, who spent her life insisting that questions are more important than comfort, would have been deeply suspicious of a documentary that resolved her complexity into a clean verdict. She picked fights at 80 because she believed the fights were worth having. Whether she always chose them well is a different question. Both things are true. History rarely gives us heroes without edges. She and Aldo remained together until his death in 2011, 2 years before her own. 73 years of marriage. In interviews, she talked about him with the same directness she brought to everything else. They fought, they disagreed, they chose each other every morning for 7 decades. She died in Trieste in June of 2013. She was 91 years old. She had been working until her final months. What Margherita Hack left behind exists on two scales simultaneously, which seems appropriate for a woman who spent her life moving between the cosmic and the human. On the cosmic scale, Asteroid 8558 Hack orbits the Sun between Mars and Jupiter. It was named for her by the International Astronomical Union, the body that governs the naming of celestial objects. It will be there long after every institution that ever questioned her right to speak has been forgotten. Her contribution to stellar spectroscopy and to the international data systems of NASA and ESA are embedded in the infrastructure of modern astronomy. Every time the Hubble Space Telescope produces data that requires spectral analysis, it is drawing on a tradition of knowledge she helped build. On the human scale, she left a model of public scientific communication that Italy had not seen before and has not fully replaced since. Direct, unafraid, willing to explain difficult things clearly, and willing to say uncomfortable things loudly. She left a generation of Italian women scientists who had, for the first time, a visible example of what a female director of a major observatory looked like, what she sounded like, how she moved through rooms that were not built for her. She left the argument, the specific, unfinished, necessary argument about what it means to live in a country where science and faith have been in tension for 400 years and where the resolution is still, stubbornly, not here. She once said, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science." She was quoting Einstein. She was also describing herself, a woman for whom the mystery of stellar atmospheres and the mystery of how a society learns to think clearly were the same problem, approached with the same instrument. Evidence, observation, the willingness to follow the data wherever it leads, even when it leads somewhere inconvenient. Margherita Hack had an asteroid named after her by scientists, and a lawsuit filed against her by the church. Which one do you think history will remember? Tell me in the comments, because I have my answer, but I want to know yours, and I suspect that if Margherita Hack were watching, she would want the argument to keep going. She spent 91 years proving that the universe rewards the people who keep asking questions. The least we can do is keep asking them. If this story moved you, share it with one person who has never heard her name, because there are too few scientists in the world who became legends, and too many legends the world has already forgotten. I'm Irene, and I'll see you in the next one.